Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're back, and we're going to pick up pretty much right where we left off. And in our last tutorial, we basically set up the game so that you had a weapon, you could fire, and send these cubes flying as you shot them. Alright, so this time we're going to give the player health, as you can see by the health bar in the top left, and we're going to give a way to damage the player, like this. Alright, so you see the health bar slowly drains, and then when you die, I just completely deactivate the object just to simulate death. Alright, so we're going to be modifying the base entity script, and we're going to be creating a new script to actually damage the player. Alright, so I'm going to be deactivating this and reactivating the old one. I set up my scene so that there's the goal scripts and then the scripts that we're working on. Alright, so to edit the base entity, we're just going to double click on it on the character and open it up. Alright, so we're going to start out with some variables, and so the first variables we're going to create are going to be the audio clips, which is going to be the character's hurt sounds. So we don't want these to be editable from other scripts, but we do want them to be editable in the editor. So we're going to do the serialized field attribute again. And we want these to be inherited from anything that extends from base entity, so protected, audio clip, and it's going to be an audio clip array because we want multiple audio clips, and we'll just call it hurt sound effects. Alright, and the next one is going to be a texture, which is just going to be the basic texture that we use for the health bar. And we also don't want this to be editable from other scripts, so serialized field, protected texture 2D, and it'll just be called health bar texture. Alright. And then we're going to create some variables to store the actual health of the character. So we're going to make a protected float, and we're going to call it current health, and we'll just give it a default value of 100. Alright, and next we're going to create what's called a property, and the property is basically like a getter or setter for a field like this, or variables, and it allows you to access a variable and give it certain qualities that you wouldn't normally get from just using basic variables. So, for example, we'll just create a public float, and to create it, it's really similar to creating a field, and we'll just give it a capital C and call it the same thing, current health. But instead of giving it a value or anything like that, we're going to treat it like a function and give it curly brackets. And we're going to modify the get function, and it's going to return current health. Alright, so why are we doing this? What this does is it allows us to modify current health within our script and access current health from any other script. And since there's no set here, you can't set the value from any other script. Alright, it basically creates a read-only variable. So, for example, if base weapon had reference to the base entity, if we tried setting a value to current health, we'd just throw an error because there would be no set. If we wanted to be able to set the value and do other things, we would just go set, and then we can say current health equals value. Alright, value is the value that is being passed into current health. And let's say we wanted it to do something, we could just, do whatever afterwards. So every time you set the variable, it would do something specific. So that's kind of where the power of these properties comes from. It allows you to do specific things whenever you modify a variable. All right, but we don't want to do anything with the set. We want it to be read-only, so we're just going to get rid of that. All right, so we just have a read-only current health. All right, now we're going to do the same thing, except it's going to be for the maximum health. All right, so protected float maximum health equals 100, and public. Oh, needs to be a semicolon. All right, public float maximum health with capital get return maximum health. All right, so we got two read-only variables now. And now in the start, all right, we're going to create a start function because it's not there. We want to make sure that current health is equal to maximum health. So current health equals max health. All right, and remember that I'm modifying the variable, or like the field, and not the property. All right, because if even in this class, if I was to try and set the value of the property, I would still get an error. So we're modifying current health, the field. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a method called take damage, and this is going to allow us to decrease current health and check and see if the player's died, or play some audio if he's taken damage. Right. So public void take damage, and we want to pass in a parameter, and it's going to be a float, and we'll just call it damage amount. Alright, so what we do here is we take our field current health minus equals damage amount, and then we want to check and see if the player has died. So if current health is less than or equal to 0.0f, alright, so if it's less than or equal to 0, we're going to log that the player's died. So you died. And then we're going to deactivate the game object. So set active false. And yes, that should be good. Oh, and we're also going to return. So we'll just back out of the function so it doesn't move on. Alright, so if the current health is less than or equal to 0, character dies, and we back out. If it's not less than 0, then we move on. And what we're going to do is we're going to check if the audio is playing. Alright, because we don't want to play a sound effect if the audio source is already playing a sound, because then you're going to get clipping and it's going to sound really bad. Alright, so if the audio source is not playing, and we'll do a safety check if hertz sound effects dot length is greater than 1. Alright, because we're going to be picking a random sound effect out of the hertz sound effects array. And just the way we're going to do it, we want to make sure that there's more than one sound effect in that array. That way that the sound effect isn't playing the exact same sound every single time you get hurt, that sort of thing. Alright, so now that we got that, we're going to be using some code that's really similar to what we did with the head bob, where it was playing the footstep sounds. Alright, so we're going to get a random range between 1 and the length of hertz sound effects. So go int n is equal to random.range 1 and hertz sound effects length. Alright, audio.clip is equal to hertz sound effects n. Alright, so we're grabbing the audio clip from hertz sound effects from the range we just got and setting our audio source's clip to that. and we're going to play the audio. So audio.play. All right, and then we're going to swap out the very first audio clip in the array with the random one that we got just picked out. That way, we're not playing the sound effect over and over again. All right, so Hertz sound effects n is equal to Hertz sound effects 0. All right, so our random clip is now equal to the first clip, and the first clip is now equal to the audio clip that we're playing, which is the random one we just chose. All right. So since random.range is starting at 1, we're ignoring the very first sound effect. That's why we're referencing it here. All right. And so yeah, so that's basically our take damage function. We're going to minus our health. If it's less than 0, we die. If it's not, your character says ow, and you move on. Alright, now we want to draw our health bar. Alright, so we're going to do that in the onGUI function. So void onGUI. Alright, so if our health bar texture Jesus Christ. Alright, so if our health bar texture is not equal to null, alright, so we're just doing a safety check to make sure that we actually set our health bar texture. We're going to set the color of GUI to somewhere between red and green, depending on how much health we have. Alright, so the health bar is going to be green if we're at full health, and it's going to slowly fade to red as we approach 0. Alright, so GUI.color is equal to color.lerp, and our color.red, color.green, and we're going to go with current health divided by maximum health. Alright, so red is what it's going to be if it's at 0, green is what it's going to be if it's at 1, and we're going to get a value between 0 and 1 from dividing current health by maximum health. Alright, so now that we've set the color of GUI, we're going to actually draw the health bar texture. So we'll just go GUI.draw texture, and we'll make it a new rect, and we'll start it 10 pixels out and 10 pixels down, so 10, 10, and the width we'll set it to so that it'll be 200 pixels wide when you're at max health, and then the width of it will change depending on how much health you have. So the amount of health you have at let's say you're at half health, the texture will only be 100 pixels wide. And if you're at quarter health, 50, and so on. So 200 times our current health divided by our maximum health. Alright, and then we'll just make it 10 pixels high. Alright, so we have the position that we want, and now we'll just enter in our health bar texture. Alright, and we'll just compile, make sure it's all good to go, and that's not even a real error. So now we have our Hertz sound effects and our health bar texture for base entity. I just made some really quick assets for this. I actually recorded myself for the Hertz sound effects, so they're pretty bad. And the health bar texture is just something I made in GIMP really quickly. So where did I put all that stuff? FPS assets, and then here's our sound and our textures. So our health bar texture is just a white texture for right now, because the GUI changes the color of it. And then we'll just drag in our Hertz sound effects. Alright, So if we hit play, the health bar should be on the top of the screen here. And next we will have to set up the damage so that our character actually takes damage, and we play the sounds and the health bar changes. Alright, so now that we have the character all set up, let's set up the character damager. Alright, so how are we going to set up this character damager? Basically, what I did was I just imported, I went into import package and particles, and I just imported the default particles package, and all I did was drag out the flame particles that comes with it. So if you go into standard assets, particles, fire, and I believe this is the flame one. Yeah, I just dragged that on the scene, and then I attach my script to it. Alright, so we'll just get rid of that for now, and we'll drag out a brand new one that doesn't have any scripts attached to it. Alright, so now we'll create our actual damage player script, and we're going to drag it onto our flame. So in my scripts, we'll create a brand new script called damage entity. Alright, and we'll open up that one. Alright. Now we're going to be using a attribute on the class itself, and it's going to be called require component. And basically what this does is, when you drag the script onto an object, any type you have under require component will automatically be added to the object as well. Alright, so to use it, we use our square brackets, we type in require component, and in regular brackets we go type of, and then the type that we want. So we want to use a sphere collider, so we'll just do sphere collider. Alright, and to make sure it worked, we'll go back in Unity and we'll click on our flame particle, and we'll drag on damage entity, and you'll see that it automatically adds a sphere collider. Alright, and the sphere collider is pretty small, so we'll make it bigger. So if you hold down shift, you'll see little squares appear here. And you can click and drag these squares and change the size of your sphere really easily. Alright, so we'll just make it, a little bit bigger. Oh, a little bit bigger. Maybe if I stop moving it. Alright, there, now it's bigger. Alright. So we have our flame, we have our sphere collider. We'll make sure it's a trigger because we want the player to actually be able to walk into it. And yeah, now we'll go back into damage entity. Alright, so we're going to start with our variables. First one is going to be a public float, and it's going to be called damage. And we'll just give it a default value of, say, 50. And we're going to create 3 Boolean values. And they're each going to manage whether or not you take damage as soon as you enter it, you take damage while you're staying in it, and you take damage while you exit it. Alright, so public bool, and we'll just call it damage on enter, and we'll just set it to false. And then public bool, damage on exit, we'll set that to false too, and public bool, damage on stay equals true. Alright, so our default for this script is it'll do damage to you over time instead of as soon as you enter or as soon as you exit. Alright, now in our start, we set trigger to true in the editor, but we want to just make sure that it's a trigger. So we'll just type in collider.isTrigger equals true. And no matter what, even if we uncheck it in the editor, and if we hit play, it'll automatically turn it back into a trigger. Alright, so hit play, and it's a trigger, even though we unchecked it. Alright, now we don't need the update function, so we'll get rid of that. And we're going to create 3 new 3 new methods. And these are monobehavior methods like start or update. They'll automatically be called. And the first one is going to be void on trigger enter. And the parameter is going to be a collider and other object. Alright, so this will be called as soon as the player enters the trigger. Alright, so we're going to make an if statement in here, and if damage on enter. Alright, so if we set damage on enter to true in the editor, we're going to do another check inside. If the other object has a base entity component on it, so get component base entity is not equal to null. Alright, that's how we check if the component or the game object has that component. If it does, other object dot get component base entity dot take damage. Alright, so we're just going to deal the damage to the player. And we'll do the exit one. So just like on trigger enter, this is going to be called on trigger exit. And collider, other object, just like before. And just like before, we're going to do a check to see if the Boolean is true. So if damage on exit is true, make another if statement. If other object dot get component, base entity like before is not equal to null. Other object dot get component base entity dot take damage. Alright, and then our last one is going to be on trigger stay. And on trigger stay happens every single frame that the player is inside the trigger. So we don't want to deal the full damage, because if we deal 15 damage per frame, you're going to enter the trigger and you're going to instantly die. So we're going to treat it as if it's 15 damage per second. So we're going to multiply damage by delta time. Alright, so void on trigger stay, collider, other object. Alright, if damage on stay, if the game object has a component, so other object dot get component base entity not equal to null. And we'll deal our damage if it exists. So base entity dot take damage, and damage times time dot delta time. Alright, so it's going to do whatever our damage is per second. Alright, so now we should have the ability to deal damage as soon as the player enters, as soon as the player exits, and then as soon as the player stays in the trigger. Alright, so now we should be able to hit play, go play in the fire, get burned, and eventually die. Which sounds like fun. Alright, so we'll just go in here.
Stop it! Stop it!
And you'll see that our character eventually dies. Alright. Simple enough. And just to double check, we'll make sure that everything else works. So as soon as you enter the trigger, we'll take some damage. So we'll go in there and we'll run. And as soon as you enter, it takes damage. Alright. And then we'll uncheck this, damage on exit. So it doesn't take damage while you walk into it, but as soon as you exit, take damage. Alright. Isn't that fancy? Alright. So that's good for now, guys. And I will see you guys next time. I'll keep what's next a surprise.